Hi, and welcome everybody to the Winner's Circle Sports Betting Channel. My name is Ross Benjamin. I'm your host. And like every Monday, I am joined by that handsome gentleman on the other side of me, Mr. Doug Upstone from the great state of Arizona and from DocSports.com, one of the iconic sports betting sites on the internet. Been around for like 53 years. Doug, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, buddy. I haven't talked to you since before the holiday.
Yeah, since last Monday, and yeah, everything worked out fine from that standpoint, Ross. Everything was good. The football on Saturday, in particular, rivalry week, that was like it should be. Hasn't been quite the same the last several years, but boy, I remember not that many years before, it was always fantastic, and this one certainly lived up to it from that standpoint. And then, as we talked about just before, we had an instant classic with Philadelphia and Buffalo. That was for sure. That was an outstanding game, fun to watch and highly entertaining in the elements and stuff. So yeah, so it was very good from that standpoint.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was entertaining, but it wasn't fun for me to watch at the
Right.
end.
Well, that's why I went with entertaining.
I did. I did have Buffalo yesterday. I thought it was a very short line. I didn't understand why the Eagles at 9-1 were just a 3-point favorite against Buffalo at 6-5. But obviously, Buffalo's a lot better than their record indicates, and unfortunately, they're up against it right now because they're 6-6. They're on the outside looking in. Next up, they got a bye week coming up, and then they come back and they play at Kansas City and they host Dallas. So it does not get any easier. But I don't know how you can count them out, Doug, against anybody right now. And again, I mean, their 6 losses have come by a combined 26 points. They have a positive yard per game differential. They have a very positive point per game differential. But as we could see with Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, that all doesn't matter because they're looking like they're going to be in the playoffs with not very good numbers in that regard. So it's not always about the stats. It's about the W's and the L's, Doug.
Yeah, it certainly is, and and Philadelphia to that end too falls on that same category. I mean, they're, last year I cringe a little bit when people say, well, they're not as good as they were last year, and I mean, they're not as dominant as they were last year, but I don't think anybody's going to complain about the record, from that standpoint. I mean, they just continue to win games, and as I heard, was it Matt Hasselbeck on Scott Van Pelt last night. And he said he thinks the difference between Philadelphia and Buffalo, just off the top of his head, was that this is a team that firmly believes that they are never going to lose. Now, right. That doesn't mean they won't and they can't, okay, but they just don't, and they never panic. When the situation comes up, and he goes, and that's a reflection of their coach, and then how the roster is constructed at the same time. And, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is exactly, Sean McDermott, but, you have some of this has to go somewhere, with Buffalo. I'm not really sure if it's, Josh Allen has gotten, as you said, his fair or probably overly, well, I guess goes with the position. He's going to get a lot of criticism when they don't win, and he's going to, get a lot of accolades when they win. But, I don't know. It's just, they're just not coming up with that extra something that you need to win games, and especially this year.
Yeah, it's hard to put. Look, first of all, you go back to the first quarter of last night. They had 6 penalties in the first quarter. Right. I believe they had 10 or 11 for the game. That speaks to a lack of discipline, which always falls back on the coaching staff. Correct? So that's number one. Number two, the turnovers. I mean, the one interception that Allen threw last night was in his own territory, and it resulted in a Philadelphia and ensuing Philadelphia touchdown on the ensuing drive. And too much of that this year, but I will say that Bradbury made a hell of a play on that interception. He baited Allen right into that. So otherwise, we were talking off air. This is a kid that's, he's accounted for the most touchdowns in the NFL this year, passing and rushing. So it's hard to fault him completely. my take on Allen is he gets a lot of criticism for the turnovers, and rightfully so. But he also is a gunslinger, and also takes a lot of risks, and that's what makes him great. I mean, so as a Buffalo fan, we're used to that here, and it's like we'd rather see him play like he did last night with reckless abandon than to be under constraints like he was before Joe Brady took over 2 weeks ago. And I hate to put too much emphasis on the offensive coordinator change, but the proof is in the pudding. They had 500 yards of offense last night against a 9-1 team that went to the Super Bowl last year. They rang up nearly 400 yards of offense against look, the Jets are terrible, but I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument from people when you look at the Jets defense, especially this raw data, one of the better defenses in football. And they would probably be a lot better if they had got a little bit of support offensively and weren't on the field nearly as much. But the one concern I would have with Philadelphia, and I like I like Nick Sirianni, I like Jalen Hurts. I think that, this kid has persevered. He lost his starting job at Alabama. He goes to Oklahoma, takes them to the college football playoff. Not a lot of accolades coming out of college in terms of expectations in the NFL, even though the Eagles took a chance with him as a number one draft choice, I believe. And boy, oh boy, has he lived up to expectations, and he showed his wares last night. The Eagles defense is what concerns me a little bit. When you look at over the last 4 games, they've given up 472 yards to Washington, 406 yards to Dallas. Kansas City game, they played pretty well. They held them to 336 and also 505 yards, as I alluded to Buffalo, Doug. I mean, that's a lot of yards, and somewhere along the line, that's going to backfire on you if you don't straighten that out, and it's the bottom line too is they've won 4 straight games now where they trailed at the half. In the last 2 games, they've trailed by exactly the same score of 17-7 at the half and found a way to win, which to me speaks to the coaching staff and the adjustments that are made at halftime. So anyway, Doug, Alabama barely escapes, against Auburn. Needed a miracle pass on a 4th and 17 or whatever. Boy, oh boy. You had to keep all sharp objects away from Auburn fans at the end of that game.
Yeah, I think it was even 4th and goal, if I'm not mistaken, on that from the 31. So, but it's just that was, there's just something about at that place. I don't know what it is. It's just, I think we talked about it. It was so hard to determine how Auburn would play off the New Mexico State game. It just, what did that game imply? And it obviously didn't imply anything. And, they were completely ready to play. I'm not sure Alabama, especially on defense, was ready to play. But, there were so many good games just across the board. I mean, Michigan, Ohio State, great game, better team won, I thought, from that standpoint. And, and Ryan Day, I don't know what's going to happen there or whatever, but, he just coaches differently against Michigan, it seems. And he gets more conservative. And I think that's what, hurt him or hurt his team in that game. I mean, I don't know why you're not force feeding the ball to Harrison, literally the entire game. Just on purely on principle, you have the best player. I mean, you got to have in a game like that. I don't care what the defense is doing. You got to have 12, 15 targets to this guy. Nowhere near that. Okay. And not really as much, hardly any in the first half too. That was another thing that was surprising to me. But, and even some of the minor games in terms of just regular rivalry week stuff like Purdue, Indiana was an excellent game. I mean, there was just the first 2 hours, of this, first 2 games segments in those windows. I mean, it just was, every game was really good. And, BYU, and it's not a rivalry, but BYU and Oklahoma State, I mean, that was fantastic too. It's just, that's what made it so much fun. And it's sort of sad that some of this is going to be going away starting next year, as to what the implications. I'm not saying it's going to go away completely, and things will evolve, things will change, and everything else. But it was a bit melancholy to think about that, as it was happening and as it was going away. And then when they were talking about, I watched just a few minutes of UCLA and Cal, and the last Pac-12 game. It's like, wow, so that was pretty bizarre. Anyways, so highly interesting weekend of sports and that stuff, and some, like I said, just some outstanding games. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then Oregon State's coach, Jonathan Smith, excellent coach, done a great job over at Oregon State turning that program around. Unfortunately, Oregon State and Washington State were left out of all the movement that went to the other Power 5 conferences. They were the only two Pac-12 teams that still remained. And I don't know what they're going to do going forward, but the Pac-12 obviously will never be the same as what we've been witnessing over the last 4 or 5 decades anyway. And, you can't blame him for leaving. He had an opportunity to go to Michigan State, a Power 5 school, a school that you could recruit at, and it's a lot of people, a lot of players are going to be more apt to want to go to Michigan State than an Oregon State, especially with Oregon State's non-affiliation for the most part right now, Doug. So it's all about the money. Dino Babers, like I said 2 weeks ago, he got fired, thankfully, because nothing against him personally. He's a fine gentleman. Always handled himself with the utmost class, character, and it's just, they were spinning their wheels with him. So they need to make a move. I know Dan Mullen was a name that they were thrown into the mix at Syracuse. He has since, a matter of fact, today on his Twitter feed had indicated that he is not going to accept, even if offered the Syracuse job after being interviewed. More and more looks like we're looking at Jason Candle, possibly from Toledo, and this head coach at Holy Cross right now. His name escapes me off the top of my head, but there's been some head coaching movement we've seen already. So, and plenty more to come. And you got to be careful at both. With both season coming up, right, Doug? I mean, you lose your head coach. It's not so much you lose your head coach, it's the uncertainty it puts into kids' minds. Because
now, I mean, bowl season it couldn't be any more different than it was 3 years ago. I mean, before primarily the only thing you had to worry about for the bowl season was what would be the player's reaction if a coach leaves, or is fired or whatever it happens to be. Now, with players can opt out, they can choose not to play in the game with so many things, and that can go way late, into the, literally days before a bowl game, and or literally, I mean, there's been a couple of situations in the last couple of years where the player goes with the team and then he decides not to play, I mean, those are all things. So it's completely different now from that standpoint. And so you have to be completely aware as much as you can as to what's going to go on. And obviously that makes, I mean, our job for bowl season is not easy to begin with. Add that element into it.
Yeah.
Wow. Changes a lot of dynamics from a betting standpoint.
I mean, it's no longer the kid has to sit out a year if he transfers because of a coaching change. Even prior to that, prior to the transfer rules being implemented that makes it easy for these kids to transfer now without having to sit out. If you had a coaching change, that would make you automatically eligible, even prior to the more updated transfer rules. But having said that, there's the players that are comfortable in their environment they're in. They love the university. They're in a comfort zone where they are, and then it throws them for a loop, because even if they wanted to stay at that particular university, you might have a Deion Sanders situation that comes in and tells 30 or 40 of the players that, hey, you're not going to fit my style. You're probably not going to play. You might want to transfer, kind of thing. So a lot to be considered at this time of year. And that's why it's become more difficult, as Doug says. You got to almost stick to what you know. These New Year's Six bowl games and the playoffs are always pretty much true to form. But even in the New Year's Six bowl games, you'll see players opt out.
Oh,
I mean, nobody
absolutely.
opts out when you're in the playoff, right? So college football 14 playoff, but it's just another stage for you to show your wares and escalate yourself in the draft. In any event, we got two good games we're going to talk about, Doug, in college football on Friday evening. Two conference championship games, and you're going to be looking at Washington and Oregon. Boy, oh boy, that line jumped right out at me. And I'm going to be looking at New Mexico State and Liberty, undefeated Liberty at that. So let's start with you. Oregon, right now, as we speak, they are a 9.5-point favorite. I got in the total of 67. Wow. Wow, is all I have to say. I mean, look, I've been lauding Oregon as the best team in the country over the last 4 weeks, and nothing has happened that's changed my mind over that course of time. Yeah, 31-7 against Oregon State. I think that was a good performance. That's a really, really good Oregon State team that they were facing, and also a rivalry game against an excellent head coach, like I just alluded to, in Jonathan Smith. Washington, on the other hand, Doug, you could justify the line from the sake that the Huskies haven't really been blowing teams out over the last 5 or 6 games. They've had some real nail biters along the way, and it was no different. Washington State, talk about a rivalry game that went, was a nail biter. Washington State this past week. So take it away, my friend. What do you got?
Yeah, this just added some research more than anything, and looking at this one. So what I'm going to start with, and I'll cover some of the points that you made as well, is that the earlier matchup was won by Washington 36-33 at home as a 3-point home favorite. So if you take that, and I have, for example, as a lot of people do, have Washington as a 4-point home favorite. So on a neutral field at that time, that would have made Oregon a 1-point favorite. Okay. Now the opening line on this game was actually 7.5, and then it has been bet up heavily up to 9 or 9.5. Now we're up to 9.5 as we did. This was actually even 9 earlier this morning. That means that since that time, so since game 6, so the second half of the season, that there's been a combination that Oregon has improved that much and Washington has gotten that much worse or regressed 8.5 points. Okay. That's a lot of points, no matter how you want to look at it. Now, argument holds water from this standpoint. Oregon has won its last 6 games by 26 points per game and covered the spreads by 8.1 per game on average. In Washington's last 6 games, though they were unbeaten, they were only 2-4 against the spread, won those games by just 6.5 points per game, and actually had what would be, it's not a true number, but a negative number against the spread, and they at 6.5. So add in the revenge factor that Oregon has in this one, so that kind of adds up, from that standpoint. Both teams, this is for the Final Four. I mean, if Washington wins, they're in. If Oregon wins, I don't see how they're not in from that standpoint. But in this one, Ross, I think there's actually less pressure now on Washington than there is on Oregon because of what the spread is. And I think that makes the job of Keith DeBoer much easier because they can play the underdog role, no respect, and everything from that standpoint. Keys to the game, Michael Penix is going to have a great game. Okay, it's as simple as that, but he has the passing offense to certainly do that. Oregon comes in with the number 2 offense in college football, running and passing. Now, if Washington could force a couple of turnovers and also force field goals instead of touchdowns, I think they can stay in this game. One other thing that I'm going to throw out there is that Washington has so much more experience in closer games. Maybe this isn't a close game, but I'm just going on the presumption that it's somewhat closer. Washington's 5-0 straight up in games decided by 7 points or fewer. Oregon has only played in 2 games in which the final score is by 8 points or less. They're 1-1 in those games. Maybe the Ducks waddle away, Ross, with a victory over Washington. Okay, but you know what? I'm going to take the Huskies as dogs in this one to keep this to a touchdown or less for the show.
All right. So you're going to take Washington plus 9.5 over Oregon, and he makes a compelling case. Here's the thing, and you said the last 5 games, the closest of those victories for Washington, I'm referring to.
Yep.
It's actually you go back 8 games, Doug. Their last 8 wins have all come by 10 points or fewer.
Yep.
And including in those, you had games against weaker competition in Arizona State and Stanford where you struggled to win. So inexplicably, Washington State, who had got off to a great start to the season, they did win last week, Washington, or the week before Washington State, I'm alluding to, by blowing out Colorado, who's a mess. But prior to that, I believe they lost like 5 games in a row, and they took Washington right down to the wire. So I don't know. To me, even the opening number, it did move to 9.5, but even the opening number to me really spoke volumes to me. You have a 9-1, an 11-1 team that's already lost to their opponent. It's their only loss, and they were an underdog in the first matchup at Washington, and rightfully so. And here they are. 7.5 point opening favorite on a neutral field, which basically, if that game was played at Washington today, the odds makers are telling us it'll be a virtual even game. And it's moved to 9.5 right off the bat. I don't know. I've been saying Oregon's been the best team in the country for the last 4 or 5 weeks now. I stick to that. The opening number didn't scare me. The line movement a little now. It's we have money on Washington here. When you look at the early betting, this looks to me like a sharp money move from 7.5 to 9.5.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm gonna still have a lean toward my Ducks here, and respectfully disagree with you on that one, and that's okay. We'll see, because you certainly make a compelling case for Washington as well, Doug. But our official pick from Doug Upstone is on the Washington Huskies plus 9.5 in the Pac-12 Championship game. Doug, question for you before I get to my game is, how do you leave Florida State out if they win against Louisville?
I don't think you do. I think Florida State absolutely deserves to go. So I think that's why the Washington Oregon winner is
in. Yeah.
And I don't think, in all honesty, I don't think Georgia, or if Georgia and or Michigan Michigan's not going to lose to Iowa, but if Georgia would happen to lose to Alabama, I still think Georgia's in.
Well, I do too. Do too. The question might be at that particular moment in time, depending on if Alabama wins the game and wins decisively, how much is that going to influence the committee? That's my question.
Yeah, I guess. Well, then the next question is, it depends what Florida State does.
Yes.
That's really the key. Is that, does if in the current situation with Florida State's quarterback situation, and if Alabama does win, there's going to be plenty of people that are going to believe that Alabama should jump Florida State, and it's hard to say that they're wrong, but they still lost. Okay.
Right.
And so, next year, this is not even a discussion.
It's a moot point. And I've been lobbying for an expanded playoff for a long time. I know other people are against it, but this year is a perfect example of why it would be great.
Yeah, it would add something. Is Ohio State? It's not like they got blown out by Michigan. Does anybody really think Ohio State is that much worse than Alabama, even if Alabama beat Georgia? I think you could say they're virtually even, to me, anyways. So for that, so it adds intrigue, it adds discussion, but ultimately it'll be decided on the field. And unlike the Mountain West Championship, a computer or the teams for the Mountain West Conference Championship, it will be decided not by a computer. It'll be decided, by on the field as to what goes on. So we'll see there.
All right.
We can talk about that game later, I believe, this week.
Yeah, UNLV.
Yes.
And Boise State. Boy, Boise State looked ready for the grave earlier this season. They fired their head coach.
Yep.
Late in the year. They end up in the Mountain West Conference Championship game against an upstart UNLV program that's going to be playing on their home field.
Awful loss.
Yeah, awful loss beside on their home field. All right, so I'm going to look at an intriguing matchup. It's a Friday Conference Championship game. Yes, it's an intriguing matchup, even though they're not brand name teams, with New Mexico State traveling to Liberty to take on the Liberty Flames. Liberty, by the way, folks, is 12-0. New Mexico State, what a job Jerry Kill has done over at New Mexico State, Doug. You brought this up earlier in the year, and I'm going to bring it up again. I mean, look, this is a team that started 2-3 on the season. Since that time, they've gone 8-0 straight up and ATS since that time. That included a team, they go to Auburn 2 weeks ago, and they knock off Auburn. I mean, not only knocked them off, they dominated them at Auburn, 31-10. You look at the total yardage, they outgained them by nearly 200 yards. That's an Auburn team that gave Georgia and Alabama all they can handle, and very well could have pulled an upset on either game. But you got to keep things in perspective, though. Okay, so the conference they played in, they really didn't have a tough schedule down the stretch. Yes, they got that non-conference win against Auburn, which is impressive. But Auburn also could have been caught looking ahead to Alabama.
Oh, for sure.
But we got to keep in perspective, like I said. This is also a New Mexico State team that lost to UMass in their season opener at home, and also lost to a terrible Hawaii team earlier this season. So it's not like they have a shiny resume. They got a shiny resume. It's not glossy shiny, if that's such a phrase. Liberty, on the other hand, 12-0. And they got a lot to play for, Doug, because if they win this game and Tulane loses to SMU, there's a good possibility they're going to be playing in a New Year's 6 bowl game.
Yep.
So still a lot to play for Liberty. And, otherwise they probably looking at an intriguing matchup. If they don't make, if Tulane happens to win, Liberty probably, by all accounts, is going to be facing James Madison in a bowl game. And that's going to be a great matchup. But, Liberty, you look, it's not like they're barely getting by. They've scored 38 points or more in their last 6. Their last 5 wins have all come by 13 points or more. And if they did beat New Mexico State earlier in the season at Liberty, and they dominated that game. They won the game, and they outgained them by over 200 yards, and they covered easily as a 9-point favorite. New Mexico State has revenge. Yes, New Mexico State has improved dramatically since that time. But, if Liberty was going to be a flat spot for Liberty, it certainly shouldn't be now, especially if they saw what New Mexico State did with Auburn. So I am going to lay the points here, Doug. Going against the red-hot New Mexico State Aggies, who have gone 8-0 straight up in ATS in their last 8. But we're still talking about an undefeated team, and a team that's winning by large margins, and a team with a heck of a lot more to play for, I believe, in this matchup and on their home field. I'm going to take Liberty here, Doug, minus 10.5.
Yeah, you mentioned Jerry Kill, and the only comparison I can come up with here, let's just say, that correlates, because New Mexico State has been for literally decades one of the worst football programs at this level of football. Okay, and when they were booted out of the WAC, everybody just assumed they would just go to I forget the name of the conference out west, next level down. And they didn't. They just hung around, and things just turned around, and then hired Jerry Kill. And it's the only comparison I come up with is Bill Snyder. This is a long time ago now, but when Bill Snyder went to Kansas State, Kansas State was a coach killer. that's what the job was. I mean, you go there, you get a 4-year or 5-year contract, you're out the door. And this guy's done exactly the same thing. Now, Kansas State's not New Mexico State. I'm not saying that, but because actually New Mexico State's an even worse program. Okay, just overall. But I mean, to go 10-3. Just remarkable to me. And as you mentioned, 8-0 straight up and against the spread. Liberty won the earlier game, and they won it primarily. I mean, they did dominate the action, but they also had a 3-1 turnover edge in that game. And if you look at New Mexico State, 2 of their 3 losses, I mean, they didn't turn the ball much over, but in certain games they did, and that was one of them that they did here. The thing that's a little puzzling to me, though, Ross, is that the line goes from -9 in the earlier game to -10.5 against a team that is on an 8-0 straight up and against a spread run, playing in the same conference. So basically the same level of competition. So, this isn't certainly a big play for me at all, but I'm going to take New Mexico State on the hook at 10.5 here on this one. Cause I just, they're playing so well. Do I think Liberty's the better team? Unquestionably. I agree with everything that Ross said, but in this situation, I think they're going to be really hungry. They said that they will have the revenge angle. Yeah, Liberty's at home, tremendous offense, but they have a lot to play for, but that comes then with added pressure at the same time. So we'll see how they react to that. New Mexico State, they're playing with house money right now, okay, across the board. They can win the conference, okay, themselves, knock out an undefeated team, and, have literally the best, or be the best New Mexico State team ever. I don't know what previous records there were before 1960 about the program. I don't care because nobody else does either.
That's true.
But the last time I think they won 9 or 10 games was 1960. So that goes back a few years. I'm just going to take 10.5 on this one for the show, Ross, and I'll be happy to do it in this case. And once again, we respect each other so much about our disagreements, which is great. And, and we root for ourselves to win. That's all.
That's it. Hey, man, it's a competitive business, and when you're not against me, Doug, I want you to win all the time,
Yep.
so and vice versa. So it's okay. It makes for good conversation, and we don't disagree for the sake of disagreeing, folks. If you've been following our segments with myself and Doug over the last few years, that there's been plenty of times we agree with each other on one of our picks. So in any event, the official pick, though, is on Liberty -10.5. And then Doug likes the Washington Huskies +9.5 over Oregon in the Pac-12 Championship game. Both of those games are on Friday. The Liberty game goes at 7 o'clock. The Washington game goes at 8 o'clock. And I'm sure 95% of the viewership will be watching that Washington-Oregon game with keen interest. And I certainly will.
And I'll have 2 TVs on, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Sports Network and Fox. So there we go. I'll be ready to go for both. Because I admit, I like Jerry Kill. I really do. I'm amazed what that guy does. He's won at some programs that not many people do.
Yeah, he won at Minnesota. He had the health issues there, which he had to step away from
Northern Illinois.
Yeah, in Northern Illinois as well. He had a really good track record there. Yep. So, again, the coaches don't play each other. And the coach from Liberty is the former coach of Coastal Carolina.
Right.
So,
Jamie Chadwick.
Yeah, and everybody said, why would you go from Coastal Carolina to Liberty? It's a lateral move, but from my understanding, Liberty is really committing to a lot of money into the football program, and I'm sure they had something to do with it. And right now, it's showing instant dividends. Hugh Freeze.
And the way these teams move around now, I mean, I'm not saying they're gonna, the next move for them is to go to the Sun Belt. From that standpoint, go the next level up. And who knows, they could even, and maybe even a couple of years on the presumption the American's still around, that would be the next move after that. So they have high ambitions, and, Chadwick has proven himself to be a very good coach.
Absolutely. One at Coastal Carolina and one in grand style there. And again, he goes to Liberty. Hugh Freeze left him a pretty good batch of players. Hugh Freeze was a former coach at Liberty that went on to take the job over at Auburn, ironically. So,
Yep.
in any event, those are our 2 picks. Doug, tell the folks what you got going on at Doc Sports right now. Any streaks you like to share with the audience, or anything else that comes to mind?
Just from that standpoint, the didn't have my best weekend for football just across the board. You had Buffalo, I had Philadelphia, so I got the push on the other side going that way. So that prevented a winning day in that. But I still won 7 of the last 10 weeks in the NFL, and I do have a play on Monday Night Football if you happen to catch this video before then. So check that out at the Doug Upstone page at Doc Sports. The things in the NBA, everything's just a little bit above 500. It hasn't been a great week. I mentioned last week how good everything was. Hasn't been as great this week, but you know what? These sports go on for a long time, and you're going to have a few ups and downs, as you, the viewer, knows, and as Ross and I definitely know from that standpoint. So you know what? So just what you just got to do is you put your nose to the grindstone, and just start plugging away, and just trying to find those edges where you can. And especially these conference, or I'm sorry, these college football, college basketball tournaments. They're always a little iffy, okay, when looking at stuff. I'm not saying people don't have success at them, but from the standpoint, they're not always easy, because you don't always know what you're dealing with here. Like yesterday, had a really good day with Butler in particular. That was really nice. Had an easy winner with them, and they look like they're going to be an interesting team with Thad Matta, the former Ohio State and former Butler coach, back there again. So it's just stuff like that. So hey, just getting ready to go here, Ross, and just make some things happen.
You can find Doug over at docsports.com. You could also find Doug's daily videos. He does Tuesday through Sunday. So puts out a lot of good material there. Also does a pay-per-view podcast with Scott Spreitzer, another excellent handicapper over at Doc Sports. Again, fill them in on your pay-per-view podcast you do, Doug.
I'll just make it real quick. It's ideal for the person that doesn't want to spend a lot of money for selections, but wants a large volume. It's $19.99 a month. And so with the bowl season coming up, it's a great opportunity to get lots of opinions on lots of bowl games. We've got 40 plus bowl games coming up. NFL now is going into the last third of trimester of its season coming up here. So there's lots of opportunities. So and then we got the college championship games that Ross and I have talked about 2 of them. I believe it's 9 that there are. So you can get that by signing up. It's $19.99 a month, and that's at usagainstthespread.docsports.com.
All right, there you have it. You could find me over at gamblersworld.net. That is our sponsor, folks. Right now, we have a Cyber Monday sale going on. You get $100 off select packages, and that applies to the NCAA, NBA, and NCAA full season packages in basketball, the remaining NFL season, plus the NFL playoffs. So a lot of good things that you could still partake in when it comes to football, and also the basketball packages there, annual packages, all $100 off today. It's Cyber Monday at gamblersworld.net. Also, remember at gamblersworld.net, not only myself, there's 9 other great handicappers at that site. And we guarantee all our picks, which means that all the single game, daily, single and multi-game daily packages, as well as all subscription plans of 30 days or less. If you don't win, you don't make a profit, we're going to credit your account back the exact amount of your purchase price. And in terms of how I've been doing of late, I still remain number 1, even though I took a hit yesterday, still remain number 1 at the site since its inception. Also got some pretty good streaks going on. College football, for example. I only put out 3 college football plays on Saturday. I went 2-1, including the top play winner on Michigan. 68-46 in college football since December 2nd of last year, at somewhere around 60%. That'll make you a really good profit. And also the NFL, despite a 2-1 day yesterday in the NFL. Boy, oh boy, Doug, I took a hit yesterday. Not only that push in the Buffalo game the way it ended, but also I had the Chargers +3.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I'm going to walk away with a push here. And lo and behold, on a 3rd and short with less than 2 minutes to go, instead of just taking a knee after he made the first down, the Baltimore wide receiver decided he was going to go all the way for a touchdown. And I lose the push and it goes to a loss, but it is what it is. I win games like that too. NFL 38-27, 58% since week 2. All sports, folks, since August the 4th, every mainstream sport that I handicap and I put picks out on, 171 and 123. That's over 4 months period of time. It's 58% run during that course of time with 294 picks released. And my dime players, $1,000 a game players, up $36,170 during that time. NBA up to a 14-9 start to the year. And keep an eye on my NBA sides, money line and point spread picks. And I don't give out big money line favorites. When I do, it's usually a short favorite or an underdog. I am 48-19 since April 12th of last year with my NBA sides. 48-19, folks. That's good for 72%. So keep an eye on those NBA sides. And I got the Monday night winner tonight in the NFL, and I'm sure Doug does as well at DocSports.com if you see this in time. But there you have it. Doug, there's a like button underneath. Any suggestions on what they should do with that like button?
Yes, they should just punch it. That's
All
the
right.
thing to do. Hey, and one other thing before I forget
Sure.
is that with Josh Allen losing, I actually feel sorry for him, and I understand his pain more than ever because I saw last night that he's lost 10 games in overtime, okay, as an NFL quarterback. So nobody understands losing in overtime more than I do. So I feel if I could get his, I should look for his TikTok or one of those social media things and find his and tell him, hey, buddy, I'm right with you. I got it.
Yeah, that was plastered all over social media last night. Another way to attack this kid. 0-6 to be specific, Doug.
Was that what it was? Okay. All right.
In overtime games, and 2 of those came in the playoffs against Houston early in his career, and then that 13-second debacle against Kansas City. I don't know how you blame him for that. I mean, he made some excellent drive on the last drive of the game and leaves 13 seconds on the clock, and Sean McDermott decided he was going to take over as defensive coordinator in the last 13 seconds, play soft, and Kansas City ties the game. And then Allen never saw the ball in overtime. So how is that his fault? I don't know. Anyway, they actually made a rule change because of that. But in any event, Doug, there is a subscribe button, folks, if you have not subscribed already. For those of you who have, we deeply appreciate it, folks. I think we're somewhere around 11,700 subscribers right now. The channel has shown exponential growth, especially over the last 6 months, and certainly since me and Doug started doing these together. And also, if you're watching on your PC, you'll see a WC logo. If you haven't subscribed already, just click on that. That'll get you subscribed. It's absolutely free to do that. It's absolutely free. There's no strings attached. Also, on your smart TV and your mobile device, which the majority of you are on, you'll see a black subscribe button underneath. Just click on that, folks. It'll get you subscribed absolutely free. And if you haven't done this already as a subscriber, or you just subscribed, take an extra second to do this. Go into your YouTube settings, hit that alert notification bell for the Winner's Circle Sports Betting channel, and you'll be notified immediately upon any of our future podcasts going up on this channel, which are 6 days a week now. So in any event, for Doug Upstone and Ross Benjamin, take care and God bless, folks.